Welcome back. Now, this week's been notable in business for two landmark developments. Retail baron Gerry Harvey calling for tax imposts on online retailers as his bricks and mortar business looks ever vulnerable to cyber vulture competitors. Fairfax, meanwhile, out preaching a message of further integrating its online offerings with the hard copy version that no longer looks so faithful. The question being, too little, too late. Suresh Sood running the most popular social media marketing course in the Southern Hemisphere, with over 700 executives who attend his course at the University of Technology in Sydney, and joins me now. A warm welcome to you. It's intriguing, this conundrum of just how you shift into a different mentality when so much investment over so many years goes the way of bricks and mortar. To call time on that, to believe that fads in the online world are anything but that. How do you look ahead, Suresh, and say, yes, these trends will stick?
Okay. The most important aspect is the trend we're talking about in terms of social media, Facebook and so forth. It's here today. There's more than 500 million people online on Facebook alone. Right. So within Australia, we can access 10 million people. That's here today. We're building a generation of, if you like, gamers who don't want to do anything but stay indoors. And they're here now.
Is it a given that they will be here to stay, though? Will there not be almost this cyclical turn of the tide like there is in so many other sectors? Why is this one different?
Okay, this one's different because, firstly, social media itself, if we take the media component, it's a revolution. Right. It's nothing like it has existed before. It's a revolution since Caxton's printing press. The way in which we can consume information, use new devices, discover new deals, for instance, online, for consumers to go online and to save up to 90% on a deal that's just on their doorstep.
And yet, you know, you travel the world and you go into, let's take a Waterstones in London, a big bookshop in Piccadilly, and you see the books stacked up to almost to the rooftop there, telling me that some out there in business don't buy this idea that it will all be down to that, okay. That we'll say goodbye to paper, for instance.
Okay. Look, there'll be a hybrid world for situations where we're comfortable with paper. But this is like the CD shop. There is no longer a record shop that we typically go to listen to music. It happened overnight. This is the extinction of a business or businesses.
So, okay, because you were saying that there will be a home for some offerings, acknowledging that, for instance, books, there will be an appetite out for them. So, but then when you say there will be an extinction of some businesses, okay. How do you differentiate?
So it's about new businesses reinventing old, and old businesses not being able to cope. So I can see broadcasters such as Sky and others, who will pull through books, educational materials. Universities, for instance, are quite complacent in the online world, many of them. So if you have a broadcasting company that steps in, for instance, we're talking about social media at this stage and education, imagine after this program for executives to be able to access that material. Yeah. So we're talking about reinventing businesses in ways that we never thought possible before.
I suppose a lot of the concern would be, though, still that this is not a secure environment. We like to think of HTTPS as being our mainstay security, firewall, call it what you will, but still, you think about those people who never leave their bedrooms, concocting ever more illicit ways of cracking the uncrackable. Until we get rid of that, why would we have the confidence to put all our store in it?
Okay, so it's interesting. It's not only bedrooms. We've got people sitting in internet cafes in Russia and Nigeria, etc. Absolutely, the best brains in the world. However, technology is continually changing. For instance, we can use our mobile phone to authenticate where we actually are. So a merchant can check where I physically am I who I say I am? And frankly, you can use biometrics. And all of this technology is here, but sadly, certainly not being fully embraced, and we are seeing movement towards it. But certainly the environments today are secure. You don't necessarily need to part with any cash or any monies until you've received the goods and so forth. So, look, these environments are very good. For deal making, basically merchants can take money from consumers and prior to shipment feel quite comfortable, and vice versa.
What will be, though, that catalyst to get conventional bricks and mortar businesses sort of away from an obsessive focus on that? Because at the moment they seem to be dabbling. They seem to be coming online in some of their catalogues, but they're only half-baked. You don't get the full suite of products as you see in store. There's not a real-time inventory. Who's steering this in the right direction? Who's grabbing a march at everyone else?
Okay. So what we are seeing is, and we're looking at it from a local perspective, we're very backward. I've got to say, because of, I guess, the monopolisation of much of retailing, and I guess the lack of, in some cases, choice or value for money, if we look at it purely from an Australian perspective, we've basically been handicapped. From a global perspective, you clearly have the likes of Amazon and others, but now new players, Hop Shop Go, for instance, out of Singapore. You can ship any item you want to purchase, whether it be fashion, whatever items from the United States at reasonably discounted prices. Right now, today, and that's all available here. So there is a complacency. There's a complacency to have been reliant on the bricks and mortar, and we heard that through the midweek results that came through, the despondency. Yet, we have retailing going online, new players. There's Kogan, Brown Box kind of is really... not really got to grips fully. And there are industries like wine, for instance. There's a site called Booze Monkey, which is totally dedicated to social networking.
So what doesn't work in that space? What's been tried and what's been deemed to be perhaps even too big an item to really work through that whole social networking system successfully?
Okay. So what doesn't work is actually traditional products like milk. Typically, these style of products, we're not really looking for information content. So what really works is where, for instance, if I wish to purchase a television, I want to share information with you as my friend. I'd like to understand if you can recommend that television, or whether you'll recommend an alternative option. That's why the online environment has taken off so significantly, because of this recommendation capability.
What about things that go viral, though, that campaigns that suddenly find themselves snowballing and people cling on to those? They do actually develop a trustworthy factor when, in fact, they may not have that whole manner of them about themselves at all. They've just sort of morphed into the believable and the credible from being quite a fringe item.
How do you discern? The only way a consumer can discern is by going to a friend or a recommender. But if you suddenly have these great offers and great opportunities suddenly appear without taking into account a recommendation, you're absolutely spot on. So trust has to be placed somewhere. So either in a well-known brand name or in your network or your social network, which is why Facebook has been embraced so strongly.
Do you think the whole payment as well, the trend in that direction when it comes to trusted sources, is something that can be ultimately sold to the public? Or because you look at two different markets, you look at The Guardian in the UK, which is one of the most widely read news websites that doesn't charge and has managed to successfully still make money for the company, the Guardian Media Group. How do you determine at what point you put up the barricades and say, well, this is a privilege, not a right?
This is a very difficult question, and at the moment, for the next few years, we're going to see a lot of experimentation taking place. Bring up a paywall, take one down, etc. The real challenge, though, if we go to the heart of news, is, and I'm going to use Australia as an example, Australians, as an average, spend far more time on Facebook than most other countries. Something like, we would spend over 7 hours per month. That's eating out of time from somewhere, eating out of time from news. Why is this important, and why is it important in the context of news? Because this is about social news. For instance, if I was born in London, I am interested in news from my friends, and so I devote time in that area. So setting aside serious news, business news, such as what we're talking about here,
news is a vehicle of Facebook.
Correct, absolutely.
But ultimately, it's often just going to be second-hand hearsay. It's not necessarily going to have that ring of reliability, whether they're your friends or not to take anything away from that. It's a whole world away from going direct to the source.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two types of news we will have to distinguish between. So the ideal way in which news will emerge forwards will be a combination. It'll be a blending of what does the rest of the world, what are consumers, what are others reading about, what do they think? And we will actually have to merge that in with the traditional news. And whether there's going to be an 80% trusted, 20% sourced, we don't know, and this is where that experimentation certainly got to come in.
And what happens if you have players like China who do put up the barricades, who do say there is not going to be open access? How do you really know what is going on inside that economy? It seems that you'll get a distorted view.
Yeah, absolutely, and you've got 600 million people online that can get an instant view that may be actually factually incorrect. So there is no answer to that other than open and being open.
A brief thought as well, just back on the paywalls as well. If you pay for an article only to open it and find you've got just one paragraph story, you're going to invite a bit of a backlash. What has to be at the heart of paying for content? Does it have to actually be value add demonstrably to justify it?
Okay, I think this hasn't changed since the time of Julius Reuters, in reality, from sending pigeons. That basically, if that news is available to me at the right moment and ahead of what the value that it places on others, i.e. it's more valuable to me, whether it's personal or whether it's business, that's what will count. Getting the news to individuals in a timely fashion.
What worries you the most about the potential for all this to go wrong?
Actually, what worries me is actually the sabotage. I actually think there's a complacency amongst executives that are in self-denial. And we'll graft this on, as opposed to making this an integral part of business. The fact that we're talking about social and online here today, I would hope in a year's time, social and online is not discussed. It's integral to business. So that's really what keeps me awake at night and why I work with educating execs.
Come back inside 12 months. Let's see how it's all evolving.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Dr Suresh Sood there, of course, advisor of online communities and storytelling researcher at the University of Technology, Sydney. And that is the show. We'll see you next week.